This is September 5th, 2024. This is the C4 meeting, Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, Mayor Hobson and Commissioner Savas. The meeting is yours.
Fabulous. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're going to first take care of the Pledge of Allegiance. So, Trent, if you do the honors of throwing up a flag for us, that would be super swell. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Perfect. Welcome. It's good to see everybody. Hopefully those of you that have kids, summer has wrapped up and we are, as we were just discussing, we'll probably have a little bit of Indian summer here this fine September, but fall is right around the corner. And as Trent said, we do have a full agenda. So we'll just quickly go around and make quick introductions. And I'm going to start with, we'll start with Sherry.
Okay, Sherry French, Clackamas River Water.
Thank you. Ms. Pratt.
I'm Valerie Pratt, Tualatin City Council.
Thank you. Mr. Sherman.
Brett Sherman, Happy Valley City Councilor. Really pleased to be here with all of you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Commissioner.
Hello, everyone. Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner, co-chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Michael Milch, Mayor of Gladstone. Good evening.
Thank you, sir. John with TriMet.
John Sarah, TriMet Government Affairs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for being here. Joe Buck.
Joe Buck, Lake Oswego Mayor. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Mark Hilliard.
Yes, Mark Hilliard, Hamlet of Beaver Creek, representing the hamlet.
Thank you for being here, sir. Appreciate it. Miss Stavengord.
Hi, everyone. Rebecca Stavengord, she, her pronouns. I'm a city councilor in the city of Milwaukee.
Great. Thank you. Miss Newland.
Hi, I'm Jody Newland, Council President, City of Malala. I'm filling in for Mayor Kaiser while he's at another meeting. Joining you from our park at soccer practice.
No, that's a great, I'm like, wow, that is a really great background. It's almost as good as Sherry's. And then finally, Christina.
Good evening, everyone. Christina Babcock, Human Services Supervisor at Clackamas County.
Thank you very much for being here. Well, I am Mayor Brian Hodson of the City of Canby. I am your co-chair with Commissioner Savas, and we are going to get right after things. So first up on our agenda this evening is the State Transportation Improvement Fund, STIF, upcoming grant process. And it sounds like, based on my notes here, Christina, you're going to be taking us through this.
That's right. Let's get rolling here. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Maybe?
Yes.
Yep. All right. So as I said, I'm Christina Babcock, Human Services Supervisor here at Clackamas County. And tonight I'm going to take you through a quick presentation on the statewide transportation improvement funds on behalf of all of the transit providers here in Clackamas County. So what we'll start with here is Clackamas County. We have 3 different types of transportation programs at Clackamas County. We have public transportation, which consists of the Mount Hood Express and Villages Shuttle. We have our last mile shuttles, which are free for public use. And then we have our elderly and disabled transportation services, which are demand response services or door-to-door services for those that are 65 plus and or experiencing a disability. And all of these programs at Clackamas County fall under health, housing, and human services. So for FY 24-25 statewide transportation improvement funds, all of the providers came up with a plan. That plan was vetted through local processes, ultimately through an advisory committee with TriMet, approved by TriMet's board, pushed to ODOT, and then ultimately to PTAC. And then all of them, the plan was approved, and then those dollars were dispersed, and all of the providers fulfilled, particular projects. So this is Clackamas County's. And so what we used STIF for in 24-25 was really trying to expand transit service in Clackamas County, focusing on the last mile shuttles. We added the CCC Express shuttle, which connects our Oregon City and Clackamas industrial shuttles. And then we added a route out to Estacada from Clackamas Community College. Focused on trying to increase demand response services for both dialysis and medical rides. And then really spent a good amount of time trying to increase coordination of services between all of the providers in Clackamas County, most notably coming up with the rideclackamas.org website, which shows all of the transit providers in Clackamas County, allows people to do trip planning, look at services that are available, and really get an idea of the scope of transit within Clackamas County. And then obviously we have our services up in the Mount Hood area. So we continued with the additional service we added back in 1921, purchased some new vehicles, and are still working on that transit hub study up there, hoping to bring multiple providers into a transit hub up on the mountain. So for 26-27, looking at continuing that funding for Mount Hood Express, we're going to further increase demand response services, working with some of our local senior centers and other small providers, notably Sandy and Canby. The county is going to work with them to kind of expand the area in which they provide demand response services to try to reach some more rural parts of the county. We're going to use STIF to match federal funds for 2 bus purchases, further transit hub development, and then look at our regional coordination projects. So that's Clackamas County Transit in whole. And so next we'll look at SMART. So SMART is South Metro Area Regional Transit there in Wilsonville, owned and operated by the city of Wilsonville. As you can see, they gave about 195,000 rides in FY24 with 9 routes. 6 are in town with connections to Canby, Salem, and Tualatin. And then they have the Dial-A-Ride program, Smart Options, and Vanpool, excuse me. And most notably, all of the service on Smart is free except to Salem and medical trips out of town. So for Smart in 24-25, they continued their regional connectivity to Tualatin Park and Ride and Salem. Continued to do the local service on neighborhood shuttles and out-of-town Dial-A-Ride service. They purchased 3 new CNG cutaway buses, and they're going to provide match for operations yard expansion, which will allow them to continue to potentially expand service and have more buses on site. For 26-27, going to continue doing Tualatin and Salem, continuing administering the STIF program and providing program reserve for projects, continue out-of-town Dial-A-Ride service, look at replacing some of their electric and CNG vehicles. One of the big things that should start in FY 26-27 is the regional service to Clackamas Town Center along I-205 with bus on shoulder. So that project started a few years ago with a discretionary grant. Buses are coming in this year, and ODOT is preparing the shoulder for bus on shoulder. So that service should start hopefully in the 26-27 funding cycle. Also looking at new regional service to Woodburn and Kaiser in coordination with Chariots on Route 80. The Smart Transit Center TOD has broken ground and looks good, and they're going to start building the transit oriented development right there at the Wilsonville Transit Center, and then continue to look at bus stop and amenities to improve access and connections. All right, next up, Canby Area Transit with their fancy new logo. And so Canby is a division of the city of Canby with a population of almost 18,000 based on 2018. So I imagine it's actually higher than that now. And services, their primary service is the 99X that runs from Woodburn to Oregon City Monday through Saturday. And they also offer demand response and paratransit service Monday through Saturday. Ridership is down there on the bottom, about 62,000 rides during the weekday for their 99X and about 3,500 on the weekends. And then you can see the demand response ridership as well. 24-25, they focused on Saturday services. So continuing to provide those Saturday services, including the fixed route from Woodburn to Oregon City. And they became fareless in September of 2022 on that. And then additionally, they added the City Loop, which began in October of 2023, which operates Monday through Saturday and also is a fareless service. So for 26, 27, continuing to fund that Saturday service at current levels on the 99X and with demand response and paratransit. Continuation and possible expansion of the local Canby Loop route that's seen good ridership. And it serves the high school there and most of the parks and businesses. And so looking to continue to increase ridership on that local route, which we relieve some pressure on the 99X to open up capacity there. And obviously you see the last note there is that they expanded to Saturdays on July 1st of 2023. So they want to continue to focus on that and hopefully expand to operate 12 hours a day. Next up is South Clackamas Transportation District in Molalla. It's been operating in Clackamas County since 1989. They have 3 routes: the Clackamas Community College route, the route that runs to Canby Area Transit Center, and then the city route. It's all deviated fixed route service open to the public. And so deviated fixed route service means that those buses will deviate 3/4 of a mile off a regular fixed route with an advanced reservation, and then $1 fare for the service from Canby to Clackamas Community College. Additional service, they're looking at trying to add some more, or they did, excuse me, in 24-25, add some more service hours during the morning commute to Clackamas Community College, bringing people in to the college from Molalla. Why that's important is the community college has actually become what you would maybe consider a transit center, if you will. Many of the local providers are now using that campus with a nice transit area to bring buses into, and so it allows for a lot of different connections. And then for their Molalla City service, they added service on Saturday for limited hours. And then in Canby, they extended morning and evening service. Much of what South Clackamas focused on during 24-25 was improved rider safety and comfort. They look to simplify trip planning. They added Passio Go so people can see where their buses are, added bus shelters, added lights and poles to stops since they are way out in the rural areas on the side of a road in most cases. And so, trying to make it easier not only to see riders, but also just safer with lights and markings of where the bus stops. And then in FY 26-27, they're going to look to maintain those current service levels and do a City Express service from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Continuing to improve that rider safety and comfort, adding some more bus shelters out there in the rural areas and new e-readers. And then South Clackamas is looking to purchase 2 smaller transit buses. Many of their routes are long, and they found that some of the smaller transit buses or Ford Transit vans have actually made it more efficient for them to run their service, much less expensive than some of the bigger buses, but still fulfill the needs for capacity. So last is Sandy Area Metro. So they've over 20 years of service in Sandy with about 11,000 people. Ridership was 111,714 last year. All in-town fixed routes are free of charge. And then you can see that there's a small fee for both dial-a-ride and out-of-town medical rides. They have their Sam Gresham route, Sam Estacada, the Sam Rides, which is general public dial-a-ride, and out-of-town non-emergency medical rides. You can see there in red, Sam Clackamas Town Center. That's a new route that's been started that runs from the City of Sandy's Transit Center into the Clackamas Town Center, hitting areas of Damascus and that have no other transit service. And then they added Saturday service to their shopper shuttle. So again, I touched on some of their 24-25 impact. That Sam Clackamas Town Center is 6 runs a day, 6 days per week. They continue to set aside funding for future expansion planning. They need a new building with a larger driver training and break area and a maintenance bay. Not only does the City of Sandy operate out of their operations center, but the Clackamas County with their Mount Hood Express does as well. And as both of those services continue to grow, we've kind of reached max capacity at that operations center. So every cycle they put away money to eventually be able to build a new building. They again they added shopper shuttle service on Saturday, and then they have their continued expansion on their 3 main routes. 26, 27 looks much the same as all the other years in Sandy, because Sandy doesn't get a ton of STIF money, so they have to stretch it. So they'll continue to focus on those 3 routes with expanded service, potentially add another route to or another run to the Clackamas Town Center route, and then continue to set aside funds for that new building that's badly needed out there. So that pretty much is what I had to share. I didn't go over all the STIF specifics because I think everybody on the call has a pretty good idea about STIF. But that's kind of gives you a preview of what has happened in the last couple years and what's planned to happen in the next couple years.
Christina, thank you very much for the presentation and going through that with all the providers. It does seem, and I know here for Canby Area Transit, the next round of even just the fiscal year and then the round of STIF that we're looking at, it's pretty much a status quo kind of thing. There isn't a whole lot more that we're going to be able to do. It's just going to be a shoestring budget for sure. So I think that seemed to be kind of the case with all of the rural transit pieces, if I'm reading through that correctly. So thank you. Any questions or comments for Christina? All right, we'll go with Councilor Sherman first.
More just curious, I know that TriMet has expressed historically that it's been very difficult to hire drivers. And is that consistent with the other providers as well, or is that kind of city specific? I'm just curious kind of how that looks in the exurbs.
It's been a challenge for everyone. Some of the providers are more successful than others. Smart out in the city of Wilsonville tends to have a better time handling drivers because their drivers are city employees, right? So it's a more attractive job. The other providers contract out with transportation service providers, not as an attractive of a job. So it's harder. My service for Clackamas County, Mount Hood Express particularly struggles because people don't like driving the 10% grade of Timberline Road in January. So there's incentives in place to try to, encourage people to take that trip. But yeah, I wouldn't say that the smaller agencies have as hard of a time as TriMet, but that's probably just based on volume, right? TriMet needs so many drivers. We need less, but when we don't get one, it's more critical. So it's kind of a give and take. But yeah, everyone is still struggling with that for sure.
Very good. Thank you.
Mayor Milch.
What really appeals to me, looking at all these, are some of the local shuttle and local shopping services like in Sandy and Canby. In Gladstone, we have about 5 or 6 TriMet routes that go through our city and take us elsewhere. But a local shuttle like that, we're under some of the climate friendly equity. I can't remember what it all stands for. Rules about having no parking minimums in certain parts of our city that are close to frequent bus service. And we don't want to invest money so much. Well, I don't at least want to invest money in parking for public parking for people as much as we could get people to go that in parking lots that we currently have that are a little farther away from some of our shopping districts. Are these local shopping shuttles, are they eligible for funding if we already have TriMet? Is the STIF funding only for communities that are not as well served by our regional transit systems?
So that's actually a complicated question, but I'll do my best to make my answer brief. So there are STIF formula funds, and those formula funds are dispersed based on where people live where they work versus where they live. So the majority of STIF funding ends up going to TriMet, who's the QE, right? Because many people work within the TriMet service district. And then the other providers that I presented on tonight get a much smaller disbursement for the people who, are working outside of that TriMet service district. So those funds, which are called STIF formula funds, are used in areas where TriMet does not currently operate, right? So we want to make sure that the money that is coming into Canby is used for service inside Canby, right? Same with Clackamas County. However, there is a portion of the dollars that goes to TriMet that they have carved out called STIF Regional Coordination. And the goal of those funds is to help fund shuttles to fill last mile gaps. So my Oregon City shuttle, my Clackamas Industrial, Clackamas Community College, Estacada, Sandy to Clackamas Town Center. And at one time, Smart to Tualatin, I think it's still funded, is funded through regional coordination. So the answer to your question is yes, maybe. It's just more complicated than that, right? So stiff dollars only go so far. And as Mayor Hodson said, you know, it's kind of status quo out in the rural areas because we only get so much. And, you know, in Clackamas County specifically, you know, starting a shuttle in Gladstone would be, you know, talking to TriMet about, you know, what do regional coordination funds look like? What does the need look like? What areas aren't being served, can't be served, etc. Does that make sense?
Mayor Buck.
Well, thank you, Chair. I had a kind of a similar question, you know, so Wilsonville, they're outside the TriMet area then.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, so there, all of these transit services are being funded through this set aside, and or this other, you know, what you just stated. So what would be the process for, you know, like what Mayor Milch was saying, or we also have we have a shuttle kind of program within town too that we'd like to expand that we're just running ourselves. You know, what's the process to kind of get involved in, and, you know, John, I don't want to put John on the spot on the call, as especially we look to the future and maybe enhancing the stiff, you know, what are the opportunities to go beyond maybe just usually find a kind of last mile, like, you know, we're somewhat like the Clackamas services you mentioned, we're shuttling seniors around, taking them to the grocery store, taking folks to the food pantry, you know, that type of thing.
Okay, so let me clarify one thing. So all of the small transits, so Canby, Smart, South Clackamas, Sandy, and Clackamas County get a stiff formula distribution. That is based on where people work, not where they live, right? So $69 million, my numbers aren't exactly right, but $69 million in a year come into the Tri-County area. And a formula is used to say this much goes to the TriMet service district and this much goes outside, okay? So everybody gets a set allocation and we have a certain amount of money to do that. Clackamas County's is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1 million versus the city of Sandy's is somewhere around 200,000. Don't quote me directly on those numbers, but we're somewhere in that neighborhood, okay? So that is separate from a regional coordination allocation. So the regional coordination is money that goes into the QE TriMet based on the fact that people work in the TriMet service district and they have carved out a portion of their formula funds to work with small transit providers to increase that regional coordination. And that the idea was to help fill gaps. So ultimately, to answer your question, how do we get more shuttles? Well, first of all, one of the STIF rules is that everything has to be in a plan, right? So I can't at Clackamas County just say, you know what, I really like Joe Buck and I want to start a shuttle in his area and I'm just going to go fund it. It doesn't work exactly that way. So there has to be, you know, in a plan somewhere. So Mount Hood Multimodal Plan has a lot of, you know, service stuff up in the Mount Hood area. The Clackamas County Transit Development Plan has a lot of different services that's identified as being needed or missing connections. Every city, and I even believe South Clackamas, has a transit master plan or a transit development plan, right? And so like Wilsonville will complete a transit master plan that looks at the services that their system currently provides, and then also looks at like missing gaps, right? So the first step is having that transit planning done. Then the second step would be to work with local transit providers to say, hey, you know, I see this is in the plan. I think it's something our community really needs. What do you think? And then the process moves from there. That's oversimplified, but that gives you kind of an idea of how it starts. So the biggest hurdle for most cities is getting those desired shuttles into transit plans, right? Like how does it get incorporated into a Clackamas County transit development plan? Mayor Hodson has a little easier time because he's his own city, right? So he can talk to Todd Wood, the transit director, and say, what are you thinking? They can rework their transit master plan. And, you know, then there's something there to work off of. Some of the interior cities in Clackamas County, that's a little harder.
Okay, can I just, so does the plan have to be coordinated with the county or could it just be a city's own transit plan?
It could be the city's own transit plan. I mean, ultimately the county is going to be the one that, provides the service. So generally I highly recommend that you work with us so that we know what's coming and there's nothing, you know, we don't get surprised by it. But there's a couple cities out there that have looked at going after grants for transit planning and have, contacted me and said, hey, what do you think? And I'm always willing to have that discussion. And just because it's in a plan doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, right? But the plan's the first step.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Savas, you have the last question here, and then we need to get into the TriMet portion of the presentation.
Yeah, and maybe John can speak to this a little bit, but some of you maybe heard this before, some probably not, but when the HB 2017 bill passed with the STIF element, the STIF element, the legislative intent was that we are, for the monies derived from payroll from employees, workers, that the concept was, the legislative intent was they'll be paying a portion of their TriMet tax out of their payroll, out of their own check. And in turn, the service will follow that. It'll be more oriented towards where the employees live versus where the typical funding is where the employer is. So that has been that was the concept, and what really happened in the rulemaking only really particularly, well, I won't say only, but particularly that was kind of upsetting to us was that we thought this might be a great opportunity to fill not only the gaps in between, but also add things like shuttles and where it was appropriate. But in the rulemaking, that's not really what took place. And I think that if we can't come up with, some kind of an agreement to get a little bit more funding that's a little bit more fair, and maybe do some math as to, the number of employees in Clackamas County that have no service but are paying. I think there's a legislative argument to be made that there needs to be a remedy for that, or a path towards a remedy for that. So we're hoping we can work with TriMet, who is the qualified entity in this case, to come up with a solution. And we hope to have that so there's more funding. The $69 million to the region, that's a lot of money. But $1 million or 200,000 is not very much to the smaller providers. So they really are on a shoestring. And we're not even talking about the areas where we have transit deserts that aren't being served, but yet we have people that live out there that are paying, that are working in the area, in the region, and they're paying through their payroll, but they're not receiving the service. So I hear this often from people who live out in parts of the county that they have no service, period. And that's just a gap we're trying to fill. So I'll stop there, other than to say this last thing, and that is that I've been clamoring for a shuttle, a local jitney shuttle in the Oak Grove area, because our community asked for it for over 25 years. We've been saying, hey, we can, because our topography is really hilly, Oak Grove, Jenny's Lodge, and if we can get people down to the main line, 99E, or the Route 33, 34, we can get people to those main lines, transit ridership will go up, but people just can't make that climb. And there's not much sidewalk. So I'll stop there. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. John, I think, are you doing the TriMet piece?
I am today. Thank you, Chair Hodson, and thank you, Commissioner Savas. I'm a resident here in Oak Grove. I hear what you're saying. I think I'll go through my presentation, and I think I might touch on some of the points that you were making lightly, and I'm certainly happy to answer anyone's questions as well, obviously. Also going to recognize that I'm going to try and keep this presentation tight, since our planning director, Tom Mills, was here just a couple of meetings ago to make a very similar presentation on what our STIF plan was for the 24-25 biennium. So thank you, Trent, for giving us the opportunity to come in here and just give another update like this. Trent, do you want to pull up the slides, or am I doing that?
All I had you was driving. If you need me to do it, let me pull them up.
If you would, Trent, that'd be easy. I don't have them.
Just give me a second, please.
Thanks. All right, thank you, Trent. I appreciate it. Okay, so our TriMet STIF investments for the fiscal year 24-25, this is the current biennium. We are using this funding to invest in our community. The first thing I want to highlight is our Honored Citizen Reduced Fare program. This offers qualifying riders unlimited rides for $28 a month. And this program has served more than 64,000 Oregonians since 2018 and resulted in more than $14.5 million in savings during that time. This fare is eligible. People are eligible for this fare based on their income, military service, or participation in other government assistance programs, as well as age and mental or physical disability. So that's a really important part of what STIF is paying for at TriMet. We have also become a national leader with our enhanced safety and security efforts. This has been a huge focus at TriMet over the last couple of years. Obviously, it's been in the news, and we are trying to respond to that and make sure that our riders and the community feel safe. So our safety response team is a major part of that effort, and one that we've invested heavily in with our STIF funding. This connects people on and around our system with social services, such as housing, mental health, and addiction services, while discouraging illegal and inappropriate behavior. That's one of the things that we really like to highlight because it's an innovative program that TriMet has pioneered, and other transit agencies all across the nation are picking that up. But we are also funding all levels of security and safety teams that are all over our system. I believe we have more than 420 safety and security personnel on staff right now, and we are aiming towards having at least one person on every 2-car train consist by the end of the year or earlier. So that's something that we're working on now and really proud of. Finally, and I think important to this group, is this funding supports and has supported the most comprehensive restructuring of our bus service in our more than 50-year history. This last year, and just starting last week, actually at the end of August, these were significant upgrades to service in Clackamas County. And overall, these changes will bring bus service to 50,000 more residents across the district, as well as weekend service to over 100,000 additional residents. Trent, next slide, please. And again, I know that this group is mostly concerned about how STIF funding is creating better connections in Clackamas County. I want to be clear that we are really invested in this regional coordination funding, and we are really invested in coming up with a solution to support you all, working with Trent, working with Commissioner Savas, working with Christina to try and come up with a solution that is in the best interest for everyone. I certainly believe that, and I'm advocating for that on your behalf and on TriMet's, hoping that we can come up with a solution that really gets to that. But I will recognize that even in the last biennium, TriMet roughly doubled its regional coordination program funding. So during this 24-25 fiscal year, that was more than double what we provided in the past. And that is what TriMet is voluntarily providing to our partners to ensure that we are making those connections and getting that last mile service to make sure that all of our residents are served, as well as the folks that Commissioner Savas is very rightly concerned about that currently don't have service. Couple of highlights that I wanted to point out. TriMet provided $2.2 million to Clackamas County during this biennium to operate shuttle service. Christina just touched on all of those, but it includes the Clackamas County Industrial Shuttle, Oregon City Shuttle, Clackamas Community College Express Shuttle from Clackamas Town Center, and the Estacada Shuttle. We've also provided smart $3.6 million to run service into the TriMet district. Just to be clear about that, TriMet is not legally able to run service outside of our district, but we can pay other providers to run service into TriMet's district. So that's one of these cases where we are making sure that that connection is happening by funding another provider to provide service into our district, because we can't do it the other way around. Lastly, I wanted to highlight the Sandy area Metro is receiving $900,000 to operate the Sandy to Clackamas Town Center Express line. So those are all different ways that we are getting at these services that you are talking about. And thank you, Christina, for all your help with these and for highlighting them as well. Also want to talk about new service in Clackamas County that STIF is funding. We had a great event in Clackamas County and Oregon City 2 Fridays ago, celebrating these new services. And I really appreciate everyone who has worked with TriMet on these services to make sure that they are serving your communities to the best of all of our collective abilities. We really appreciate that. Just to highlight some of those services, we are looking at the Tualatin to Oregon City line, which is line 76. That's a great extension that is creating that wheel connection that's not just not the spoke to the city center, but the connections on the outskirt of the district between Washington and Clackamas County. We have the Westland to Lake Oswego line 153, which we worked very closely with Mayor Buck and Mayor Bialystotsky on to make sure that that is serving their community and we're getting to the residents in their cities that need it most. We have the Wilsonville, Lake Grove, Mountain Park to PCC Sylvania and downtown Portland line. Councilor Pratt, I know that this is something we've worked with you all on, and it's not a perfect solution, but it is something that we are proud of, and it's getting people to additional destinations between your community and downtown Portland. And we also restored service levels that had been reduced during the pandemic between Oregon City and Clackamas Town Center. And we have new service, new frequency to the Oregon City. We have new frequency to the Clackamas Behavioral Health Center, which is outside Milwaukee. We expanded frequency to that to ensure that patients could get to that when they need to. And we are also using STIF funding to rehabilitate the Oregon City Transit Center. So that's something that is in the works, but we are excited about. That is our ability to create a better regional hub for us and for all of our providers, giving some of the folks that Christina works with additional capacity to lay over and make connections with TriMet in Oregon City. So we're really happy about that as well. And Trent, next slide, please.
So not turning over?
Not for me.
Okay.
And here I just have a full breakout of all the numbers and the pie chart. I'm going to spare you from reading all of these to you, but just wanted to make sure that you had all the information available. Happy to try to answer questions to the best of my ability and certainly take any questions and or comments back to our planning department to answer them after the fact as well. That's my presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Great, John. Thank you very much. Any questions for John and his TriMet presentation? Ms. Pratt.
Hi, John. Thank you for increasing the frequency on the 76, and I can't remember on the new Wilsonville to Portland line. How frequent will that be? Do you remember? Because there's been different.
Which line do you remember the line number, Counselor?
I don't. It was 96, but I think you're going to change it.
Was 96. I'd have to double check, and I can do that pretty easily.
Oh, that's okay.
I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you in a chat during this thing when I can look it up.
When our CEPA project's completed. My other question to you is on the low income fare support. How do you let people know about that, and what do people need to do to participate in that program?
It's hard to let people know about it. There are so many ways to communicate with people now. There's not just an easy way to get in touch with people about this. So we need your help. We are utilizing every avenue possible. We are frankly spending a lot of money on trying to get the word out about this in any way that we can partner with you for your help to get this, to get the word out about this program. We certainly appreciate that and would value that partnership. The way that people sign up for it can be complicated. We're trying to figure out how to make that easier. It requires going to a TriMet facility to get an ID, and that is because of some federal requirements that we are not currently able to get around to make it easier for folks. We're trying to figure out how we can do that, but currently it requires that people go to a TriMet facility to apply or complete their application. And I will follow up with you also to make sure that you've got all the information for that, and we can chat about different ways that you might be able to get the word out to your constituents.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, John, thanks for the presentation. I just have a question on that one second to last slide. It mentioned there 2.2 million for Clackamas County shuttles and 3.6 million to SMART for service into the TriMet district and 900,000 for Sandy. Is that annual? What the single annual amount, or is that the collective amount total? since HB 2017 passed.
Oh, it's certainly not the collective amount total. I think it's for the biennium. I got those numbers from Tom Mills. I'd have to double check that it's not annual, but I think it's biennium.
So it's every 2 years.
That would have been, yeah, during the 24-25 cycle, yeah.
That's correct. That's correct, John.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, did I answer, I know you had a handful of questions and comments that you had brought before. Did I answer those appropriately, or was there anything else that I could respond to you about?
Well, I know that, again, clamoring for that local shuttle in areas where it's, the topography is very challenging for people, is a big issue. And I really believe that we can really increase ridership with shuttles. And so when the Grove Link took place or got started, I follow that. And I know, well, Mayor Truax is no longer there, but he was a big advocate of it. I talked to him several times. So I just think there's a model there that we could emulate. But perhaps if there's the resources there to do that, we could grow that. And I know that TriMet would prefer to have a city or a county or another agency do that, not do it themselves. I'd say that I would welcome the resources that would actually support that.
Great. I'll take that comment back to our planning team for sure.
Thank you.
Ms. French, you're our last question / comment, and then we need to move on.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, you talked about the rehabilitation and expansion of the Oregon City Transit Center. It sits on a very small island. So what is the rehabilitation and expansion, and where would it go?
Yeah, so it's going to be on the same plot of land, and you're identifying all of the challenges that we have with that area. There's a couple different things that we need with this. One is that in order to expand service throughout Clackamas County, this location is actually a linchpin for our driver layovers. That's where drivers can actually stop a bus, get out, use the restroom. That's one of the major hindrances that we have to actually expand service in Clackamas County. We need a place where these people can do that. This is the place where they do it right now, and there's not enough room to handle additional bus service coming through. So one way that we would be accommodating that is redoing the layout so that the interior of the transit center will have more layover space for buses, and pushing the actual stops out to the exterior of the property. They will still be out of lane on both McLaughlin and on Main Street in Oregon City, so they will not be in lane, but they will be on the exterior of the property, giving more space on the interior for that bus layover. The other aspect of that is that it's a very old facility. It's very small. It is not code compliant. It doesn't offer hardly any amenities for our operators, especially considering our operator shortage and how hard it is to get operators at TriMet. One of the things that we need to do is make sure that they actually have amenities and can do their job well and feel supported when they're doing it. So rehabilitating this transit center is a major step in doing that and giving them the resources that they need as bus operators. So it's making the facilities better.
Thank you. That, to me, that little wedge of land there, and what you're saying is, it's counterproductive. What about moving the transit center up on top of the hill, which you could have more room for parking for individuals that just wanted to, use the bus for the main part of their journey. It would be more cost effective. That little, and there's nowhere to go. I mean, the most positive thing is the Oregon City Police are right across the street, but that little piece to say, basically what you said is your update and what you're proposing for that is to benefit the drivers and not the public. And I appreciate that, but it is congested. Oregon City has, and I'm sorry, it has lousy bus service. I used to have bus 33 come across South End Road. There were a lot of people on it. I see your TriMet buses in Oregon City with 2 or 3 people. I'd like to see more out in our area, and people to get to the transit center. The majority of individuals who would use mass transit are basically up on top of the hill and out. We're talking Beaver Creek, Redland, and around. So I just wondered where that went. Thank you, though.
Yeah,
Your information was great.
Thanks, Jerry. I certainly appreciate your comments and understand where you're coming from. I think in response, I would say that we've looked into our options here, and unfortunately, it is not more cost effective for us to move to another location. That is a very expensive option, unfortunately. And I'm sorry if I didn't explain how this rehabilitation will work well enough. I would respectfully disagree that there is no benefit to our riders. I mean, we're going to be working with Oregon City to enhance this area in accordance with their historic downtown, making lots of streetscape improvements, there are safety improvements, there are ADA improvements. So we're actually saving the city a lot of money by being able to do this rehabilitation in accordance with what they are already trying to do on that stretch. So I can give you more information about that if you like, but we are certainly, this is for our riders. There's also a benefit to our drivers as well. So thank you for your comment. And yes, we would certainly like to see more people on the buses out there as well. So we are trying to make the service that gets that happen. Thanks.
John, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm not sure, but if there are additional questions or comments, I'm sure we can get those routed to John for his response to those. So thank you for that, John, and thank you, Christina, for your presentations. We're going to move into our next item, which is the regional coordination funds update regarding STIF, and presenting is Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask that our transit providers stick around too, in case we get any of the technical questions here. But harking back to February and March, I believe, when our transit providers, both on the local side and even TriMet, also local, but a little bigger, we're sharing information about how STIF funds work. There were a lot of questions by this committee about where the dollars originate, where they go. This presentation is a great example of those dollars in work. So I want to start there, but there are a lot of questions about what could change or what could be improved or what could create some consistency or some predictability within those revenue streams for the small provider, what I call the small providers, where TriMet offers, as John said, the voluntary amount of funds for regional coordination. It's been on a grant basis for the last couple of years. How can it become more predictable, perhaps through formulas? So from those conversations that started here at C4, there embarked I'm going to call it a negotiation for short, but really a conversation between TriMet and the small providers on trying to find a long-term solution with those funds. The goal was for that conversation to be done by now and for there to be an agreement. And that hasn't happened yet, but what I do want to share is that they are all still at the table. They are all working in earnest to find a solution. John referenced that during his presentation. There are a few disconnects on how the agreements would work with the flow of money, but that seems to still be in negotiation. And I just wanted to give this group an update because there was a desire to have all of this done before the Joint Committee on Transportation came to Clackamas County. There's still a few days left for that to happen or to be possible, but I wanted to reassure this group that there is still good communication, everyone's still at the table. They haven't broken down yet. So until we hear otherwise, I just want to reaffirm that this is still moving forward at the direction and desire of this group at large. And as with all things in a negotiation, not everything's perfect on both sides, but they are working in earnest to solve it. So as we know more of the final details, we'll be back in touch with C4.
Great. Thank you, Trent. Appreciate the update on that. And with that, we're back on schedule. Thank you, sir. Next up is the Joint Committee on Transportation, September 26th, at Happy Valley. Trent, I think that's you again, sir.
Raise your hand if you have heard of the state transportation package coming in 2025. Everyone, we've been talking about it. Raise your hand if your city has provided a logo to the Joint Values and Outcomes document that C4 supported. A lot of you have. Thank you very much for that. I think we have 4 cities that are short on that. And so for the of our larger cities, 2 of them just don't have it on the radar yet. And I haven't heard from 2 of the other cities. So we have most of the Clackamas communities in here. I might start petitioning our transit providers to jump on, which has been maybe a bit of a delay. So stay tuned for that. But I wanted to make sure that everybody in this room knew that we are in process for coordinating the strategy around how our communities show up at the September 26th visit to Happy Valley. Thank you, Happy Valley, for hosting the Joint Committee on Transportation. Those committee meetings are going really well. For those of you who haven't been tracking it or who didn't get to sort of shadow or watch some of the things that happened when they came into Portland for their first visit, they have been going around the state. There are 12 visits total. On September 26th, there will be 3 things that happen. The very first thing that will happen is a tour in a bus that's managed by ODOT. They really choose the route, but we've been in coordination with them on where they go. It will start, I believe, at the Happy Valley City Hall, and you need an invitation from ODOT and the Joint Committee on Transportation. You can't just show up. So mostly that tour is for the legislators, both on the committee and any of the local delegation members. So if you want a seat on the bus, you really need to reach out to ODOT to try to get that seat. There, I'll just be candid, there's limitations on every trip. 1 city seat, 1 county seat, 1 transit seat. We have 16 cities in Clackamas County. There will be a small room that we put you all in with 1 sharp pencil to choose who gets to go on the bus. I'm joking, it won't be that competitive, but all that to say, it's not Clackamas County's decision on who gets to sit in the room. It's ODOT's decision. The next thing that happens is what's called a round table. This is where it gets a little bit more spicy because there are more seats at that table. This is designed to be not a behind the scenes sort of meeting, but it's not really the big public meeting. It's a bunch of stakeholders that are invited by the co-chairs of the Joint Committee on Transportation. So just reiterating that Clackamas County is not in charge of who gets to go to that room. You get a special invitation from the Joint Committee on Transportation. I would encourage each of you, if you would like to be in that room, to contact Patrick Brennan of the Joint Committee on Transportation and make your case for why you deserve to be in that room. Clackamas County will be sending a recommendation on who we think should be represented in that room from a local perspective at a very, 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 very high level. You can imagine that we will advocate for Clackamas County, but also that because we are unique in the state of Oregon, that all of our cities get a seat, at least 1 seat. So that's what we will initially recommend. But they have been favoring, for the most part, members of the ACT in the different parts of the state, and at least in the first meeting with the Portland meeting, members of JPACT. So keep that in mind. But we are going to be advocating that no matter what they decide, if they start to limit, if they can't invite all of our cities, we're going to recommend that they try to either focus on the R1 ACT and JPACT memberships. We're also going to try to recommend that they focus on the bottleneck cities because that's not necessarily represented in either of those 2 memberships. And so that's a big part of the transportation conversation. We'll recommend that as well. And again, if they're continuing to try to find ways to balance urban and rural representation as well within Clackamas County, because that's a significant piece of how transportation works in Clackamas County. So I want you to know that from a high level, we will be recommending some options for the Joint Committee on Transportation to choose from. But initially, we think that all of our cities should be at the table. That's what we think. Beyond that, and this is where anyone can show up and try to engage, is at the very end of the day, there is a sort of a town hall approach, a public testimony, a hearing. It's a 2-hour window. ODOT uses the first 30 minutes of it, and they've done that at every meeting. So there's 30 minutes gone. Everybody from that point on gets 2 minutes to testify. It's a very short 2 minutes. And if it's anything like Portland, and we're going to advertise that people show up and turn out, that room was filled to the brim. And that particular meeting is going to happen at Adrian Nelson High School because they have the biggest capacity in Happy Valley to host people who are going to show up. You can imagine everybody that shows up will not get 2 minutes if they only use an hour and a half. So if you want to testify in that, and I recommend everybody does, please show up a little early or send someone to show up early to sign in your place if you're part of a different meeting that day, so that you get an early opportunity to sign in and get your voice out there. So that's the organization of the day. And I want to put that over here. Now, raise your hand if you're going to try to get into the round table from C4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so starting to stack up. Great. Raise your hand if you think you want to show up to the public hearing at the end of the day and try to do 2 minutes of testimony on behalf of Clackamas County. 1, 2, some head nods, 3, 4. Okay, great. So what I want to share here is I would like to take names. Please reach out to me if you are trying to do either the roundtable or the public hearing or both, so that we are coordinating with you on the public testimony and the talking points. And here's what I mean by that. The first thing is we have this values and outcomes document that C4 has already agreed to. In many ways, we have things that we can advocate for that you've already, as a group, are wanting to advocate for. Finish the projects on 205, 50, 30, 20, things like that. So, for example, if we found out that Oregon City and West Lynn and Gladstone all wanted to show up to talk about the 205 project or tolling, and you each get 2 minutes, we don't want, it would not be strategic, right? If you all said for each of your 2 minutes, nearly an identical thing, right? So how can we strategically say, if the three of you show up together back to back, take this part of the tolling conversation, you take diversion and safety issues, and city number 3, you take, you know, a different element of that conversation. So how can we use our attendance in a strategic way? So Clackamas County and our team, in partnership with your staff teams, we're going to be putting together talking points so that y'all can stagger and coordinate on different elements of this. So for those of you who want to go, please let me know. Please let me know what part of the values and outcomes document you'd like to be a champion for, whether it's finishing the 2017 projects, whether it's the Sunrise area, Happy Valley, right? Whether it's 50, 30, 20 and protecting the local infrastructure funding that we have that we're dependent on and we share with ODOT. We want to make sure that there is alignment and coordination, whether it's in the roundtable or whether it's at the public hearing portion of the day. So we will be spending at the county the better part of the middle of the month to build that communication. The more we know about who's trying to attend, the better we can coordinate on that. And I think the stronger we can show up at that particular meeting. Does that sound like a plan at large? I'm seeing some head nods. Please do share this with, great. Please do share this with your councils, because we're starting to get phone calls and questions from your colleagues and our friends. You know, who's in front, who's the lead, who's in charge of this. And so on two fronts, I'll just say it again. When it comes to who gets a golden ticket to those special events during the day, it's ODOT, it's the Joint Committee on Transportation, and then it's a public hearing. Anyone can show up if you sign up. But in terms of who gets the golden ticket and when you show up, Clackamas County, us, this group here, we are trying to figure out how to coordinate those talking points and that language around things that you've already agreed upon. And we're happy to help create some strategic communication and engagement around that. Part of that might be too, the Monday before September 26th, we might hold like a special 1-hour meeting for those people who start to get those golden tickets to show up at those events, to just have a quick chat through what it looks like to show up at that meeting and have a chance to verbalize some of that plan. So please let me know. Please email me, twilson2@clackamas.us. I think you get all my emails. You know how to connect with me. Let me know if you're on the trying to get on the bus or trying to get in the room. That way we have our roster of who's going to be a champion on that particular day. And if it's not you and it's someone else from your council or someone else from your city, that works too. Happy to loop them in. And I'm also proud to say, just in case you're wondering, most of our delegation, our state delegation, is going to show up that day. Most of them will try to be on the bus. Most of them will try to be in the roundtable. We're going to have, I think, a great representation that day on behalf of Clackamas County. And we're really fortunate, we fought for it, to have a spot on this tour that they're coming to Clackamas County at all is a really big thing. Their initial draft did not have Clackamas County on it. I'm really glad that we were able to get on there. So that's a really big deal. Thank you, Happy Valley, for hosting. I'm looking forward to a really good day. There will be a lot of conversations about this in the coming weeks. Please reach out if you have questions, because it'll be there will be some swirlage right as we get close to it and jockeying to get in those rooms. I can totally appreciate that. Please do communicate with ODOT if you want to be on the bus. But I'll just be clear, they're only going to let one city on. It's probably going to be Happy Valley because that's where the meeting is. And also into the roundtable where there's a lot more opportunity to make your case that we should be in there. So yes, Mayor Hodson.
Thanks, Trent. Do we have approximate times for these things yet?
Yes, I do. One moment, please. We get over a few notes away on my page. So I believe that the bus tour is from 11:30 to 1:30. The roundtable is from 2:30 to 4:30. That's what it was in Portland. And then the public hearing is from, you're gonna have to go from Happy Valley City Hall to the high school at this point. From 5:30 to 7:30 is the big public hearing. So it's an all-day event as far as I'm concerned. Those details will come out when the agenda gets published by the Joint Committee. But in general, if you're wanting to be there for the whole day, it's 11:30 to about 7:30. they may bump some of that a little earlier just because of how long it is.
And then the high school that it's being held at is what again?
Adrian Nelson High School, you go all the way down the Sunrise Corridor to 172nd, and then you go north about half a mile, and then you turn left into looks like a neighborhood, but you'll see all the ball fields over there.
Great. Thank you, Trent. Any other quick questions or whatever? Thank you, Brett, for sharing that. Appreciate it. Okay, we've had a couple of latecomers. We've got Commissioner Lewis and then Matthew with the fire districts and just districts in general. So welcome. All right, we're going to move into C4 retreat, housing production, and menu update.
Before you do that, since you have a quorum, if you want to cover the minutes approval real quick, that'd be an opportunity.
Great, that would be perfect. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please? Thank you, Sherry. Can I get a second?
I second.
Thank you. Multiple seconds. Perfect. Any questions or comments? Changes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Thank you, Trent, for capturing that. Now we'll go into the housing production menu update. And Trent, you're still on.
Thank you very much. If you go to page 31 of your packet, I'll go ahead and screen share it so you don't have to, in case you don't have two screens like me, make it easier for everybody. We'll just share this real quick. At the C4 retreat, we talked a lot about housing production, and we also talked about a request or a desire for your staff team and my staff team to come together and talk about what is it can C4 really actually do together when it comes to this big housing production conversation. Because we've been talking about, if this is such a big deal, that affects everybody, are we stronger if we work together or coordinate together on some of these pieces, especially when it comes around some of the policies that unite us or the infrastructure projects that bridge our communities or help us reach different and new development areas. So your staff teams did just that. It took us a couple of meetings in both July and August to gather and chat about some of the options or ideas or tools that are there for us to work together on. And here on page 31 of your packet are just a few of those tools, and they're broken down into informational, action-oriented, and policy-level topics. Please note, this is a discussion draft. This is not a formal recommendation. This is a discussion opportunity for C4 to decide whether or not to move forward with some of these things, because what's not on here, and it's always an option, is, you know what, this isn't for us. So if that's where you want to go, that's fine. But this is, again, an opportunity for y'all to chat about one of the outcomes from the C4 retreat. So really is, and I can't highlight this enough, it's really complicated, and everybody has land use professionals, planning professionals within your jurisdictions and agencies. They're all super smart. And that's what I've actually really learned in the last couple of months meeting with everybody is everyone is really acute in the work, sharp and really clever and great professionals to work with. And so I really think that we have a really cool team here as a group within Clackamas County, and there's a lot of wisdom. And so there are moments or opportunities for informational updates with everybody. Part of the legislation and executive orders that have come out are going to require housing production strategies to be developed. And one thing that is available to you as a resource is that several of your cities have already or very recently adopted housing production strategies. So there are opportunities to create a panel for a lessons learned sort of environment where they can come, some of those planners or city managers or even city council members who were engaged in that, to come and talk about what that process was like, what the challenges were, what the opportunities were that were discovered, whether it was worth your time or not, if this was just something that was required to do, if it was helpful. I mean, there's a lot of things, a lot of directions that panel could go, but there is existing information here in the county about that work, knowing that other cities still need to do that work as part of some of the requirements from what's coming out of the state right now. There are also some other things that are just on the horizon that could require good informational opportunities, including The 2040 growth plan, that's moving forward. What is being rumored about this vision commission, which is kind of related to the 2040 growth plan. DLCD is putting out a lot of information and the methodology that's coming out. And so as those details come out, there's plenty of opportunities for just more data, more details on what is it that everyone will be required to do and what resources will DLCD provide to help your cities or county or jurisdictions to do that work, all for the greater good of housing production. There is also just a general principle conversation that could happen. What are those tools for housing production? What is in your control, either individually or as a group? And so if C4 wanted to move forward or proceed under this, like, let's just get more details, there are, I would say, the most options there. If transitioning here into action-oriented thing, if you wanted to be a little bit more proactive about housing production and what is it that C4 could be working on in terms of creating some group work or policies or programs, there's a couple of pathways that we talked about. Number one, we have seen and we expect there to be more of state housing infrastructure projects that will be advocated for. Ideas to improve infrastructure to create more doors. And it is pretty commonly felt by most of our common professionals in the industry that none of us build houses. The city of Canby or Wilsonville, you're not developers. The county has the housing authority that they have development capacity, but in general, y'all create policies, y'all create land use and then the market builds a house. So is there opportunity for public-private partnerships? But in relation to that, there are limitations to what people can build and cities can build based on existing constraints. And some of those constraints live at intersections. Some of those constraints live in your wastewater treatment facilities or your drinking water facilities, maybe. And so are there infrastructure projects that are limiting or hindering your ability to grow or incentivize growth? So could we create a list of must-have projects or moratorium-related projects that are keeping City of Estacada or Sandy from their ability to develop as quickly as either they want to develop or as the state wants everybody to develop? Is anyone encroaching upon those, must-have or moratorium-related projects? Similar but different, are there projects that maybe aren't in that first category, but if they were to proceed, would unlock developable areas? Sunrise is a good example of this. There's a big constraint right there at the Rock Creek Junction. If not for that project, does it unlock the eastern portion of what used to be Damascus and now Happy Valley? Is there developable lands over there that could accelerate as a result of having good infrastructure like the Sunrise Project or water infrastructure that creates a capacity for developers to accelerate the growth over there? And that's just one example. We're actually noticing a lot of the infrastructure needs when it comes to transportation are on that bridge between the urban and rural divide. So 99 or Oregon 213, 212, or even out there at 26 for Sandy. Those pinch points where you leave the urban area and get into the rural, there's a big constraint there. But the rural cities, they're fast growing because that's where people are able to afford to go and live. And so developers are building up there. So action oriented wise, is there capacity or interest in this group to create a list like this to better understand where are those infrastructure related needs and maybe even create a prioritization amongst yourselves about how to support each other when funding opportunities come along based on some of this common understanding of how do we help growth here in Clackamas County? And I would say we are talking right now about housing production, but really our policy teams, our staff members have been talking about just growth in general, the job growth and housing growth, not just, housing doors. So they're both related, we all feel. The other thing too is there capacity to create a master list of housing production investments or a sort of dashboard to sort of show needs and progress? And that's something that could potentially, I'll just be candid, those could be expensive and it's a lot of coordination and a lot of staff coordination too. We don't know what DLCD is going to do. We've heard them talk a little bit about creating dashboards too, so this might be redundant and we don't need to go that route, but is there a way to track what some of this looks like so that we're monitoring where there is growth and where there isn't growth and able to sort of use that as a data collection point for you to decide as policymakers how to work together, how to collaborate when there is funding mechanisms. So that is some work that could happen where it is just pulling together resources to get more information so that any strategy y'all produce, especially in policy moments, are centered around something that you built. It's not just, you know, good agreements or political conversations. It's actual work and data points, and that always benefits you more greatly. And then the very last thing here, and you can see that we didn't have bullet points here because this is where it gets spicy. Development for infrastructure purposes or even for coordination, it costs money. It's expensive. One area of development that's been helpful in the past was Metro's housing bond. It had limitations. It had a certain amount of money, right? And we were able to do good things from our housing authority to help do that. And we had good partnerships with our cities to go and site some of that housing development. But there isn't really presently right now sticks and bricks money within the region to go and build new things right now or incentivize development. And maybe the state does that, or maybe not. Or maybe Metro has capacity to go out for future bond money, but they're constrained by the bond that just passed, you know, so they have to pay all that back. So there's complications there. Just like with our transportation funds in Clackamas County, where as a group C4, you know, advanced a vehicle registration fee so that there was additional localized revenue for transportation projects. If y'all wanted to go this route, is there a political appetite to do something similar as it relates to housing production or just growth and job production anyway? You know this, all of these projects cost anywhere between $0 and millions of dollars. So it's just a lot of money to build infrastructure, whether it's roads, treatment facilities, whatever. So it's an interesting, it came up, it's part of your area of coordination. You are the coordinating committee. So I wanted you to know that it's on the menu here, should you want to go that route. You may need to do these other steps first, but it's here for your conversation. So discussion draft here for your discussion. We have a little bit of time for it. I'm going to leave it to you. Yes, the lights have turned off in my office because I'm in a building that I'm not in control of, but hopefully this ghostly face here is still here for you for the next 30 minutes while you have this meeting.
Thank you, Trent. Obviously, just the conversation that we had around this particular topic at our retreat was very in-depth and very intense. And so I think you've further exemplified the enormity of this conversation that is here in front of us. So I appreciate that. Commissioner Savas, your hand is up first. What say you?
Well, maybe I can just kind of share my concern with this, and we've discussed this at the AOC, Association of Counties level, that while there's a lot of money pouring in for building housing, there's not much money for much of infrastructure. And you know, if you look at the small pot of money and divvy that up around the state, it doesn't add for water. It doesn't have enough money for any one particular jurisdiction to really add water, an increment of water capacity or sewer capacity, or bring their facilities up to current standards, which they'd be forced to do, and let alone transportation projects, which are huge. The biggest thing that really kind of bothers me a little bit is that we can't just build housing and not build jobs and not build the infrastructure and not build the commercial, the services, all of that. I mean, to me, just like any planner, you're going to build a town or expand a town, you need to have the proportional amount of opportunities so people have jobs and they have a means to get to those jobs. But just building housing and not building all the infrastructure for commercial and industrial and all those things, I'm afraid will just increase unemployment because you'd be adding more people and not adding the jobs. And I think economically, not only would the state benefit, but I think we would all benefit if people could, you know, obviously have a place to go to work and have good transportation systems, multimodal transportation systems to get them to and from. I'm just concerned about this pattern of not really offering the complete amount of infrastructure. And, you know, you look at something like the Sunrise Corridor, for example, you know, that's got an element of industrial, residential, commercial. It's got all the moving pieces that could make really a complete expansion or growth that could bring that, as opposed maybe to, you know, simply building housing somewhere in the region. We all know where a lot of growth is happening right now, which is Washington County, but I think, you know, we could use an investment in the corridor. Having a conversation with some folks here a few days ago about what the Sunset Corridor, which is now Highway 26, but what the Sunset Corridor looked like 45 years ago. It was a tiny road, not unlike Highway 212. And they got it. They got an investment there, and the Sunrise Corridor really has not had that same investment. So where would we be if we had built the infrastructure? We have adequate sewer. We're making tremendous investments, major investments in sewer along in Clackamas County. They would be served by Wes. So we ought to be able to capitalize on that. So with Happy Valley's help and Metro's help and the state's help, I think we could really add a lot of opportunities for people to prosper. So I'll leave it there as a starter.
No, thanks, Commissioner Salvas. I think to piggyback on that a little bit, I think we as a state have a history of thinking of infrastructure, whether that's water, power, sewer, streets, roads, highways, however you want to look at that, being an after the development comes in thought. So let's build it all out and then go, oh crud, well, now we need these infrastructure pieces. And so how do we flip the script and do those or plan those in first and foremost, knowing that we build it, they will come, but with that, so will the demands on our infrastructure. And you know, SDCs for us as cities, that doesn't always cover what we need as we look down the road. That becomes cost prohibitive when we're especially when we're talking about trying to develop housing, they'll say the affordable housing piece, but the home that someone can get into and start building some having a place to live, but even being able to build something for their family. So I don't know how that, if that is, do we pivot and become the water carriers of that particular topic? I don't know. But thank you for bringing it up. Councilor Sherman.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a heavy lift. And, you know, when we in Happy Valley, we had the opportunity to meet with Holt and Holt Homes and Lennar and Cobalt Builders recently to do kind of our housing needs analysis discussion. And, you know, we tried to be, you know, a fly on the wall, and the conversations that we have about the levers that would make a difference for them. So much of it really is nothing more than nibbling around the edges. You know, our conversations with the state and DLCD are things like, you know, we can help streamline the approval process for pre-developed models and things like that, which is incrementally a tiny benefit to the builders and developers. And permitting turnaround time has been a concern. But when we push back on that, we find that it's actually the vast majorities of cities in the region are doing a great job at that. And it's really just a couple of cities that are more problematic and you know, one county, but I won't pick on them. And so really that too, while it's talked about as a possible solution, it really isn't a material solution. The other would be things like reducing or eliminating SDCs, which right back to the notion that we need infrastructure and it needs to be paid for somehow. So without SDCs, it's just either the state or the general public that's paying for that. And so each of those, while they are provided as possible solutions, at least in my mind, don't seem like actual solutions. And when you really get down to the bottom line, it's about labor cost, materials cost, and land cost, and financing. And so we have no control over labor costs. We have no control over materials costs, maybe land acquisition to some extent, but things like land acquisition would require the opportunity for jurisdictions to go out and buy land when it comes up very, very quickly, which would require some type of acquisition bank and maybe a state-run construction financing pool that could bring construction loans from 9 to 13% down into the, you know, mid to high single digits. That could move the needle a little bit. But even with all of those, we're not talking about affordable housing at all. And we could marginally increase housing production. So, sorry to not have any good answers, but I've identified a lot of issues. And so where we go next with that, what tools we have access to, every single time, at least in my mind, it just comes back to revenue. There needs to be financing opportunities, revenue opportunities for the cities to buffer the cost of affordable housing, and maybe, you know, whether that's coming from in the form of a future metro bond or what, I don't know. So that's my comment. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Councilor Sherman. Trent, I'm sorry, but I'm thinking we're not quite hitting the mark here that you're looking for.
You know, it's a discussion draft for discussion. It would be great if someone said, ooh, you know, we really like option 2 and 3 or those second and third bullets, but that, you know, that you might not be there yet. And if you want more information, or you want me to bring DLCD back when the methodology produces, or you want to have this conversation from the cities that have done their housing production strategy, that's an easy next step while you stew on this. But at the end of the day, you know, you have a wide range of options here that we can bring back, and then the executive committee, you know, if you're feeling like this doesn't have the traction of the C4 committee, we can just keep it transportation related here at C4 moving forward.
Thanks, Trent. Councilor Sherman?
I mean, I do have a question. When we look at, you know, DLC output or like tools for housing production, you know, I've tried to read through a lot of the documentation, but I'm obviously not a smart enough guy to do that. I need, you know, good quality staff members that can lead me along the way. But have we seen, are there valuable tools that are being provided in those tools that they created that really could actually move the needle? It seems like there's a lot of stuff, and quite often it feels like it's, let's just throw every idea at the wall and see if something sticks. But none of it in my mind is like proven tools that we can use and replicate efficiently at the local jurisdiction level. So and maybe I'm just being a bit of a, you know, bit negative on this, but I'm just not, I'm not sure I've seen those tools as actually adding really significant value to the conversation. And maybe I'm just not reading deep enough. Trent, I would rely on you for some advice there.
Yeah, spicy things I'm about to say here, so don't hold me to it. But in the discussions around some of those tools, it goes back to what you're discussing, Councilor Sherman. Like, what are those things that make it affordable or attractive for businesses or developers either to locate in Clackamas County or build new housing in Clackamas County? And, you know, it's chicken and egg on some of that stuff, but you will definitely hear in this conversation construction excise tax or enterprise zones or urban renewal areas. And, you know, I bet you have a 50-50 group right here on support for all of those things that I just said, right? Maybe even 100% anti on one or two of them. Who's to say, right? But within some of those, as I mentioned, nobody here is a development agency besides a housing authority. You know, is there a way where for those cities that perhaps want to have more housing authority type projects in there, and we are willing builders in many of those cases, FYI, on behalf of the county, is there a way that if you do an urban renewal area, and I'm throwing something out there, don't hold me to this. If you do an urban renewal area in your city, are you willing to put 10% towards affordable housing and partner with the housing authority so that there's always something set aside for development in there? City of Portland, dirty word sometimes in this room, the city of Portland does stuff like that, where if they open up a new urban renewal area, they set aside a certain percentage that will go towards affordable housing. Is that transit-oriented development? Is it through the housing authority? You know, that's a policy conversation that y'all can have if y'all want to go that route, so that, hey, look, you're doing a city-led initiative that will create funding for investments. You have a public agency that's a development agency of sorts. Is there a way to marry those opportunities to start meeting the methodology thresholds that you will be held to develop housing units? So that's a pathway that you have. So, you know, how seriously do you want to take some of these existing tools that are out there? Or, you know, again, do you want to localize something here where you create a couple $1 million as Clackamas County that are available maybe through grant process that C4 gets to decide upon, to say, all right, we got $3 million or $2 million or whatever number you're able to create through policy work. And that's a heavy lift. I don't want to shortchange that. And that's, you know, it's a tough county to do new money things. And so I also don't want to shortchange that. But if y'all were to go that route, like, is $2 or $3 million worth, given to ODOT to expand 213 and Redland to open up that route to Malala to create new safety constraints on those traffic thresholds, or on 99, or on 43 for Happy Valley and Lake Oswego. That's where, like, does $2 or $3 million do a lot in the grand scheme of things? No, but does it free up congestion? Does it make it more inviting? What does it do? And that's not for Trent to say. That's a policy conversation you get to have. But if you don't have that mechanism, or if you don't have that local revenue, you're limited to those tools that put a lot of pressure on businesses to, and you're kind of crossing your fingers, right, that they're going to come in and want to do it just because it's Clackamas County or just because it's your city. And that's a dice roll that you all get to take. So it's tricky, it's complicated, it's political. I don't want to hold back on any of those things, but if you want us to come back with a menu of things for discussion, we can build that list. You're the policymakers, you're elected to make the hard decisions. We would just build the list for you.
Before I give the three hands an opportunity, that I'm going to just kind of ask some clarifying questions here, Trent, if I may. So under the informational section there, so are just seeking clarification. So the city panel, is that something that has occurred already, or is that an idea of bringing our C4 together with who, and creating what kind of a panel are we thinking about here?
Yeah, we have 16 cities in total in Clackamas County, 12 big active cities within the county. And so if you take out Portland, Barlow, Johnson City, generally you have about 12, 13 cities that make up this group. I think of those, like 5, 6, 7 of those 12 have recently adopted a housing production strategy. I think Tualatin's pretty recent in that. I think Lake Oswego might have one that's recent too, and maybe Milwaukee. So what we could do is, since not everybody has done that, bring in those planners or city managers or whomever they want to represent and say, like, look, this is what we just went through. This is what it was like. Felt good, it felt bad, it worked, it didn't work. We learned this interesting thing, we learned this thing that we already knew. This is work that we have to do by the state. It's just more, churning of the butter. Like, I don't know what they're going to say, but we could bring that panel in for you for your educational benefit, especially for those cities that haven't done it.
Perfect, that's what I was looking for. So the 2040 growth plan piece, is that a document? Is that something that can be sent out to this group to peruse and then take a look at and decide, is that a Portland plan? Is that a state plan? Like, what? Give me high 30,000 foot level. Like, what is that? And is it an existing document that can be perused by us individually to determine if it's something we need to dive into?
Councilor Lewis, I was on your transition. I was just asked what is the 2040 growth plan? Don't kill me. It is a Metro-led initiative. It is, Senate Bill 100, into the Metro planning process. It creates that big picture, what does land use look like in the region, a document. So it exists, and every couple of years, Metro goes through a cycle to update it, and they're about to go through that cycle. So that's what the 2040 growth plan is. It affects all of our urban cities, and consequently, because rural cities go into the metro area, it affects you too.
Perfect. Vision Commission, what is that?
Councilor Lewis, I'm going to lean on you.
Sure, thank you. So what Trent just described is our normal 6-year cycle for urban growth management. Don't forget that thanks to the state legislature, knowing that housing has been such a challenge, we now have the mid-cycle review. So the biggies are every 6 years, with the 3-year interlude being the mid-cycle review. So where we are right now is operating off of the 2040 future vision. And 2040 is like right around the corner in terms of planning. So it is no longer the long range vision for the region that we need. We need the North Star of where we think we're going to be in like 2070. So the process is to start by scoping what are the things we even want to talk about. Obviously, they're the things that we know we're going to talk about: housing, transportation, land use, zoning, the role of cities, the role of the counties, the role of Metro. What does the economic development overlay look like? What does the educational system overlay look like? But the scoping process is going to help us not only figure out what are the things that we want to talk about in our next version of what is the 2040 plan, 2070 plan, but how we're going to get there in terms of making sure that all the voices, not just government type, but community voices come into that as well.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that. Tools for housing production, I think we've talked about ad nauseum about those pieces. I think there's some pieces to, I think, Councilor Sherman's point, like, great, I might have a husky chest full of tools, but I don't know what half of them are gonna do for me and which ones make sense. You know, so is that something is that a conversation the group wants to look at? And to, you know, Jody's comment in the chat, like, each city is different. You know, I might need a wrench, whereas Joe in Lake Oswego needs a bigger monkey wrench to take care of a job. So I think it's just a matter of understanding the tools available and how they can be applied. So thank you. I just wanted to kind of go through that a little bit to kind of maybe break it down for me, like what were those little nuggets and how could they benefit us? So Mayor Milch, you're up, sir.
Well, I like the idea of a panel learning from one another. We had a Clackamas Cities dinner in Milwaukee a couple months ago, and I got a very strong case of housing envy for all the projects that are going in over there. A lot of it funded through a construction excise tax. That's the step we haven't taken. We're looking at putting urban renewal funds towards some infrastructure improvements in the center of our city, hoping that that'll spur some development. But I think we have a lot to learn from one another, and we know there's not enough money statewide just to fund the water improvements needed for the city of Sandy. So, like you said, that's all that money is a drop in the bucket. But the cities that have infrastructure in place, we all have schools. We need more students, except in a few districts. So the school infrastructure is there. We need better enrollment, which means we need infill in our own communities where infrastructure exists. And I'd like to learn from the cities that have managed to add huge amounts of housing where there were very few houses before, because of they've been able to do cottage clusters or taller apartments or other things. And so I think we have a lot to learn from one another about styles of housing, maybe pre-approved designs that we could say, this is automatically approved if you follow this particular architect's plans for this kind of a triplex or whatever it is you want to do. Those are, and ADUs, those kinds of things. Cities have found that you streamline that kind of infill, small, missing middle housing, you can get quite a bit of development in a small area without the infrastructure expenses.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that very much. Mayor Buck.
Thanks, Mayor. I agree with Mayor Milch. The coordination piece would be really important. Not let kind of learning from each other, but also in these regional conversations we have, whether it's transportation conversations or others, knowing, it would be great to know like what Milwaukee's plans are, what Gladstone's plan, what Happy Valley's plans are. So especially around the JPAC table, we'll kind of have an understanding of where communities are looking to go, what kind of some of these key corridors are and how the pieces fit together. In terms of the cities and the county, I appreciate what has been said here around looking for those areas where there does need to be some coordination. It certainly seems like it'd be really helpful for folks at the county to understand where the cities, where their key projects are in terms of growth, and then again, the transportation, the transit needs that might need to accompany those. And we still have that kind of, I think we talked about the retreat a little bit, but that, kind of issue of the unincorporated folks and kind of a better way to work around that. Because, all these are little, like Brett was saying, I mean, these are all little, like nibbling around the edges a little bit. And some of the communities, like, I mean, our community, we're all built out. So anything that we can do to, put 2 units where there was 1, but, the unincorporated area folks, if they're hesitant to annex, so they just redevelop a very large property. They don't want to, divide the lot because they don't want to have to come into the city. So they end up just remodeling and putting an ADU over the garage or whatever it is. And so we're kind of losing out on some otherwise what would be good middle housing opportunities, at least in LO. And I know that Mayor Beatty talks about that in Milwaukee as well. So it would be good to coordinate on how we kind of go forward and get off this 500-year annexation plan, you know?
Mayor Buck, you made an interesting point about the, looking at infill or your situation there in Lake Oswego. Do you take a house down, one down, and put two in? And I was just in West Lynn a couple weekends ago, and right next to my mother-in-law's house there in West Lynn, the house next to her sold. They tore it down and they put 4 houses on the lot. Okay, I get it. Sure. They're asking, or they're listed at $1 million a piece. Okay, so to me, like I'm just as much of a capitalist as anybody else, I think. However, I think that that's not the heart, the intent of that being put into place. I mean, I could be wrong, but it just seems absolutely, it blew my mind that went from one house that was probably maybe $1 million, $1.5 million to 4 houses at $1 million a piece. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that we're seeing the current housing shortage at work.
Right. Yes. So, yeah. Okay. So Mayor Buck, thank you for that. Yes, Councilor Stafford Jordan.
I think a lot of these, I mean, I really appreciated the conversation so far. I think a lot of the issues that we're bringing up are interrelated. And, so I appreciate Mayor Milch, you made me blush with, with the housing envy. It was eye-opening for us as well to put together that presentation at the city's dinner, because once you have everything kind of in one place and you're able to share how those strategies are working and how they're moving forward, it becomes an aha moment for those that are even closer to those strategies. So I found myself after that event really hoping to learn what other cities were doing in that same sort of vein. And Milwaukee is also like Oswego. We're pretty built out. We're landlocked. So, we have to get creative with the type of housing density that is increased within the city, unless we're talking houseboats that, there's no really place for us to go. And I think, we've utilized construction excise tax. That's been a good tool for us. I have to admit, prior to joining the city council, I didn't really realize that that there were cities in Clackamas County that didn't have a tool like that already. So I think, with regard to some of the policy level topics, it would be really appealing to understand what tools other folks are using, or how we might be able to get a greater economy of scale if we're able to use some of these tools more widely. So that is of interest to me. I also think about, there's a repositioning of affordable housing scattered sites that's happening through the Housing Authority right now. There's 145 of these homes, and they're pretty good size homes, 2 and 3 bedroom family size houses. Those are all over Clackamas County. And over the next 2 years, those will be removed from the Housing Authority asset list and put back into the community with the provision that they maintain their affordability. So we've been really active in the conversation about what happens to those scattered site houses that are within our boundaries and even adjacent to the city of Milwaukee, because those are some folks that call Milwaukee home too. So within the city, we're talking about things like land banking. The Housing Authority brought in a really great presentation about what are some of those options, what that looks like to preserve affordability within a densely populated area. And it's appealing. And outside of the city boundaries, there are some conversations about recovery-oriented housing and how that can interface with some of the SHS goals. So, you know, I guess I'm drawn to the policy level topics. And I don't know that the end goal for those conversations has to be focused on funding. I think that's one of the outcomes, but I think that that third option could result in coordinating strategies, you know, to get that larger economy of scale. It could result in policy change. It could result in, you know, maybe Milwaukee and Gladstone partner on something so that we can't afford a full staff person, you know, on our own, but together our two cities might be able to have a common direction. I feel like that's the level of conversation where strategies like that may occur. So I think, you know, all three of these are really great. And Trent, thank you. And, you know, please carry thanks to all of the staff that have put this list together. I think these are really great options, but I realize it's also a capacity drain to be moving forward talking about this. I just want to put a marker down that this is exciting from Milwaukee's, you know, I hope I can speak for council, you know, from our perspective, especially because a lot of these topics tie into things that we're struggling with kind of in a vacuum. And it would be really great to partner with the rest of you to talk through these options.
Thank you for that. So we are running over time and we still have another section to go. So, okay, so just for direction for Trent to noodle over and the exec group to think about in the informational area section of the draft here, just shaking of heads. It sounds like there was a desire for a city panel discussion. Is that, or did I hear that? Shake heads vigorously. Okay, more or less. Okay. Interest in discussion or looking at and the 2040 growth plan. Is there any appetite for that here in this group?
And that one can live in C4 Metro. It will naturally go through the C4 Metro committee. So if you want it to bubble up, then it can certainly do that.
Okay, do we treat the Vision Commission the same way?
Good.
Okay. Tools for housing production, I think it sounded like that was a valid conversation that people are interested in having and wanting to understand what those tools are and who's used them and in what way. And maybe that can be combined with maybe the city panel conversation as well, where you do one or then do that aspect. Okay. DLCD output. Any thoughts? I'm not seeing any head shaking of wanting the alphabet soup organization of land use right now. Okay. The two action items that are there are both of those action items that we are of any interest of tackling. Item 1, state housing infrastructure and funding strategy. Do we want to dive into that? No. Commissioner Savas, yeah, okay. We'll put a pin in that one. Master list of housing production investments. So like some sort of a dashboard or data collection of kind of what's occurred, what's being invested in, and what's to come. I would be, that's a tool I think could be very helpful to know at least what is Milwaukee got going on, and so that Gladstone can be even more envious of what's going on and then can rally and create yeah, I agree with that, Rebecca. More of not a deep data investment, but more like an Excel spreadsheet of just, you know, yeah, what's going on. And then I think policy level topics are going to be those things that we're just going to keep bringing up and have to bring back and discuss. So that seemed palatable to everybody. Trent, does that help?
I have some pretty clear direction here. We're going to have a conversation with the executive committee. Between now and the conversation with the executive committee, I'm going to try to reach out to some of our staff people and just say, like, did you have a panic attack when C4 kind of agreed to 4 of these things? and some of them required a bit of work. Just want to remind you, like, you have 10 to 12 meetings a year. I mean, there's only so much capacity this group has as well, right? So some of the things that might be a little bit more urgent could be the housing production panel from the cities. That seems like that could be right pretty soon. And then in the action-oriented piece, the state funding infrastructure strategy, because the legislative session is approaching, that might be something we could potentially pull together at a staff level, maybe be back at like a November, December type meeting for you ahead of the legislative session. So just putting some things on your radar, like some of this is work, some of this is time. You have great teams, they have jobs, day jobs, right? And so this is extra on top of that. We're going to make sure that there's some good capacity in this too, and that y'all are also getting what you need to move this conversation forward. But good clear direction from you today, and then more conversations to be had.
Great. All right, our last bit here is updates, other business. JPAC impact. JPAC, any updates?
Not much going on. We did not have an August meeting, and the discussion has been, counselor, help me if I'm off, but I believe the discussion has been primarily focused on the RUFA bonding and step 1, step 2 conversation. So Mayor Buck, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, he's gone. Oh, no, there he is.
I'm here, sorry. No, sorry. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, perfect. Impact. You got 10 seconds.
Very good. We didn't meet last month, but coming up, we've got the urban growth reserves expansion with the city of Sherwood. The Metro COO made a recommendation to approve that with some conditions of approval. That'll be coming up on our September 11th meeting for discussion.
Perfect. That was 9 seconds. I appreciate it. ODOT Tolling Rules Committee, public comment period. Trent.
Let me help with this one. ODOT has been working on their statewide rules for tolling. This is something that they started back when all the other tolling conversations were going on. There is a comment period that is open here through the month. And so there's a link in your packet that you can go to if you would like. Also attach the initial document that came out with that. So that's at the very end of your packet. You have resources to get there. At a super duper high level, it is really focused on those toll projects that are likely to exist between the state of Oregon and Washington, really those bridges that go basically from Portland out to Snake River. So just kind of because of how the tolling conversation is currently paused and delayed, that's where ODOT focused a lot of their attention. I don't think, and I've heard from staff, this doesn't really need to bubble up to like a C4 level, but I would encourage you to look at it. Y'all have all become experts in tolling. And so if you see something in there that, catches your fancy and you want to provide a comment to it, you have access to that here real quickly.
Great. Thank you. All right. There's no other business, right?
I do have one more thing, and just because
Frank
this is
Wilson, my goodness.
I know, just for everybody's own personal notification. Y'all have talked a lot throughout the years about the Sunrise Project and supported a couple of years ago the Sunrise Visioning project that we got state funding for to create some visioning work there. I want y'all to know that work has been in motion for a little while. They're getting close to the end, and there is an open house on Tuesday, September 24th. I know that sometimes there are conversations from cities that are not adjacent to the Sunrise Project. What is this? How does it affect me? What's the big conversation? So like Oswego, you're not super close to it, but how is it part of Clackamas County, right? So if you wanted to know more, here's an open house opportunity. If you go to the Happy Valley Town Hall, the Joint Committee on Transportation, just 2 days after this, you're going to go through the Sunrise Project. This is a big part of Clackamas County's big stuff. So if you're engaged, if you're interested, here's an opportunity to go and do it. Also, here's a webpage that talks about all the other stuff if you can't make it. So Sunrise Project, open house. It's a thing that y'all supported in the past. I think we'll keep supporting it. Here's an opportunity to engage in it.
Perfect. Trent, great job, everyone. Thank you so much for the amazing dialogue here towards the end. I know it's a lot and we've run over. So if there isn't any more conversation pieces, let's see. Mayor Milch, can I get a motion to adjourn? Mayor Buck, you'll second that? Perfect.
I second it.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, we're out. Thank you, everyone. See you next month.